Hey, I hope you're well. I want to tell you about, I saw a thread on Reddit recently. It was actually in the CS Computer Science Career Questions subreddit, and someone said they wanted advice. How do they approach a manager who said, quote unquote, ChatGPT generated a program to solve the problem you were working on in 5 minutes. Why did it take you 3 days? So, yeah, this is quite a thread, quite a hot thread, and quite interesting. Now, for background, the person's manager is well, you might say obviously non-technical. I mean, managers and senior managers, directors, etc., they're always focused on getting results, getting delivery, and maybe sometimes not understanding how or what it takes. And at some level, the more senior you are, they almost, I don't know, traditionally, maybe less so now, but traditionally they would be like, well, I don't care how you do it. I don't want to be concerned with the details, etc. It's a little bit different today. There is a time and a place to give detail. Sometimes the detail is really advantageous to have, actually. To receive, even if you're in management. But yeah, what do you do about this if your manager says, hey, look, why did that take 3 days when I just did it in 5 minutes? Now, there was a lot of cope in this thread, quite frankly. A lot of people were talking about, especially security and also reliability, that just because you can cook something in ChatGPT, it doesn't mean it's actually good. It created this thing based on its knowledge of similar things that have been done in the past, and it's inferred that this is how to solve your problem, but it wasn't created using, for example, a framework like test-driven development, to name just one, and there are others. It hasn't gone through any kind of testing, and today, a long time ago, testing was pretty immature and unevolved compared to what we have now. Now there are many forms of testing, and we make sure that we use them all. And back in the day, you might have only just done a final UAT, user acceptance testing. So this program ChatGPT made hasn't gone through that even. So there's a lot of things that could be wrong with this code. It might not even be readable. Give it to another person in your team, can they read it? It might not conform to your company standards. Every company is slightly different, will have slightly different standards, and you may have, for example, stylistic choices, but the main thing is, whether you agree with them or not, it makes everything consistent and the team knows what to expect. So there's no way that ChatGPT will know your particular standards. So there are lots of ways in which the code that ChatGPT makes is going to be nothing like the code that you would normally make if you did it yourself without AI assistance. But having said that, right, I mean, on the base of it, or on the face of it, I should say, it took this person 3 days, and ChatGPT did it in 5 minutes. So that's a very big difference. And in DevOps, we all know that what we're trying to do is reduce lead time to delivery. That is the aim of DevOps, after all. So on the face of it, with AI, you can reduce lead time from 3 days to 5 minutes. Now, of course, as we've explained, there are many reasons why you can't really reduce it to 5 minutes. But even though there was a lot of cope in the thread from existing developers, some of whom may be using AI, I did think that this raises a lot of food for thought. You might not be able to do it in 5 minutes. You might say that 5-minute code is no good. But I think you can equally say you have a tool here that can really speed up your coding. You should not any longer, even if your 3-day code was acceptable, you should be doing it quicker. And this is my point. I think that we're going to start seeing this more and more. I don't really think that we're seeing it yet, but I think we're going to see it more and more. That we're going to be expected to speed up feature delivery. And when I say we, I'm talking about anyone involved in programming. So obviously developers, but I'm also talking about what you would not normally call developers, such as DevOps engineers slash SREs slash platform engineers, whatever you want to call it. That those of us who aren't day-to-day developers but are developing in our jobs, that we're also going to be expected to make time reductions, to make gains in our productivity thanks to AI. Now, some companies obviously don't get this yet. There's still a lot of companies that aren't really using AI that much. And I know that there are companies out there that say, don't use any AI at all because you'll risk leaking our intellectual property, or you risk leaking things that could lead to potentially a security incident. You know, if they leak from ChatGPT or something and some bad actor finds them. But those companies that are being ultra cautious, you know, at the end of the day, right, every business is competing against another business. And that's the whole point of DevOps. It's the whole point of lean and manufacturing that came before. You want to speed up delivery time. You want to decrease your lead times. Why? Because your customers are waiting. So if you don't adapt and use AI to speed up your lead times, you're eventually going to start losing customers. They're going to see that your feature delivery is very slow, or slower, because it's all relative, slower compared to your competitors. And over time, they're going to leave you and they're going to go somewhere else. So it is inevitable that every developer or non-developer programmer is going to start using AI. It's absolutely inevitable. And there's just no way around it. So if you've got a manager who doesn't really approve of AI, I mean, frankly, his or her days are numbered. And what you have here in this example is the opposite. You've got a manager who's seeing AI and is non-technical and is purely just looking at the result. And even though there's a lot of cope in this thread from programmers saying, well, you know, you don't really understand what you're talking about, to be honest, it doesn't matter. This is a non-technical manager. It could easily be the most important stakeholders in your company. It could easily be your shareholders, for example, saying, well, why haven't you started using AI? You know, we're falling behind the competition. And they're the ones putting the money in. You know, you're not going to say to your big stakeholders and your big shareholders, oh, but you don't understand. Well, that doesn't matter. You know, they'll just fire you. So they absolutely have a point. And it's the money that talks, and nothing else really matters, at least in terms of capitalism and working for private companies. And they absolutely have a valid point. So if you're not using AI already, this brings me on to my other point, start using it. Now recently I've started to use it a lot. And I've done some amazing things with it. And there's a few good ways to use it. I mean, you can use it in an IDE for auto-completion. But frankly, I'm just using it in the traditional way, which is to open ChatGPT, or as many of you know from my videos, I use poe.com, P-O-E.com, which has access to lots of LLMs. And I often use Claude Sonnet is probably my favorite at the moment, but you know, there's also ChatGPT 3.5, GPT 4.0, some of the newer ones even. There's all sorts there, and I just type in what I want. And I've done some videos on this, and I'll keep doing more if you want to see some examples. But what it allows me to do is to focus on the logic of my program and not on the syntax. So let's say, for example, that you want to create, and this is not related to DevOps, but let's say that you want to, I don't know, simulate some kind of machine. Like, for example, a Newton's cradle, which is that thing that you put on your desk and it looks like 5 or 6 balls lined up in a row, and they're on a swing, they're on very thin wires. You pull one from the end, let it go, and it transmits the force all the way through and out the other end. So, you know, if I want to make a simulation of this in Python, I just tell ChatGPT, I focus on breaking down the logic for it. I don't tell it, give me a Newton's cradle and simulate it. I could do that, and it probably will do a good job. But what I do instead is I focus on the logic of my program. So I don't really care about the syntax. I will go in, because I have practiced in Python, I will go in and be able to tell it some Python specific information which will really help me. So I will tell it, for example, try to stick to the built-in libraries, the standard library. Don't use external libraries if you don't need to. However, because this is graphically based, I want you to do this in Pygame, so import the Pygame module. Or alternatively, I could tell it, do it in JavaScript instead of HTML5, because actually there's vector graphics capability there. So I will make a choice there, and I will tell it this. And then I will tell it, look, this simulation obeys the laws of physics. So what I remember from school is that there are equations of motion, there is conservation of momentum, and I will tell it to use these principles. So I could have not told it that, but I would prefer to get it ready and to understand where I'm trying to lead it. And as time goes on, probably the first thing it will create me is something that really doesn't work at all, and then I will start to give it feedback. I will say, look, you weren't to know this, but what you produced is wrong, and this is why it's wrong, because I'm expecting this instead. So there will be an iterative process, and I don't have to focus at all on the syntax. Now I do need to know some things, like for example I might say something like use an appropriate data structure to record the initial starting positions of all the balls in our apparatus, in our device. So I will occasionally be, let's call it Pythonic, and I will bring up things based on my own prior experience of using Python. So you can't go into this without knowing anything about Python. Of course you've got to know about it. Of course I recommend you do a short course. Absolutely, 100%. But after that, I'm focusing on the logic. And how am I benefiting from this? So what happens is I'm doing lots of these projects, and I don't tend to really go heavy on the features. I tend to just produce a version 1, and I can come back to that one day if I want to. But I then leave and do another project and bring that to version 1, another one to version 1, another one to version 1. Imagine if you're working in a company pre-AI, and you know what it's like to produce a few lines of code can be quite difficult sometimes, especially when you have to look up something new and then have to debug it. It's also super difficult. And how many different projects do you get to work on in your career in the pre-AI days? Maybe, and I'm talking here as a non-developer, but someone who does code during my job, maybe half a dozen a year maximum. Absolute tops. So over 2 or 3 years in one job, you might, if you're lucky, do between 10 and 15 different programming exercises, that you probably feel quite proud of. Now, and the reason is because you're spending most of the time focused on the syntax. Me now, what I can do is I can do one of these every week. I can do 50 of these in a year, and that's conservative. If I really want to, I can do 2 of these mini projects every week. That's 100 projects a year. I'm developing some amazing, I don't know what the right word for this is, but a kind of, some might call it muscle memory. I've heard some people use this term, but basically I'm practicing I'm practicing going from a set of requirements to producing real functional breakdown of what I need, and I'm practicing this 100 times a year. This is something that previously it might have taken an entire lifetime to do. So I really think this is a super important skill for you and everyone in DevOps and cloud to develop, and I think also just regular developers, but especially us, because our programs tend to be smaller. Our programs tend to be, let's say, 100 lines or less. We're not getting into this super complicated, highly modular structure that other developers might be doing. We really don't need to do this. Maybe in some respects, if you're a platform engineer, for example, you might be developing a completely customized, bespoke, in-house developed platform. But I don't think so. I think going forward, we know how it is. There's a lot of tooling in our business, and I think that will just continue to be the case. frankly, I think it's a waste of time to do large developments in-house, and I don't think most of us will get that opportunity. And frankly, if you want to do that, just become a regular developer. Don't hang out in the cloud DevOps world, and that's my honest opinion. So yeah, I strongly encourage you to start doing these mini projects. This is my opinion, others may disagree with me, but I'll tell you what, I'm developing solid practice at doing this and learning a lot of things as I go along, learning about the capabilities of what programming languages can do, learning different techniques that I never knew about before. I could have eventually studied them maybe at degree level or in another way, reading some huge textbooks. And sure, I will dip in and supplement this new knowledge by solidifying it with extra reading around the subject, no doubt about it. But in the first instance, I'm learning so much, and yeah, I'd really encourage you to do that. So hope you found this long monologue interesting. Let me know what you think, and we'll talk again soon. Take care. Bye bye.